Okay, so like this morning I just had dreams. Yesterday morning I had this like awesome, long, drawn out. It was out of body experience, virtual reality experience, but in the more it felt more dreamy, if that makes sense. So yeah, so it was virtual reality experience and out of body experience, except it was more lucid dreamy instead of just a normal out of body experience and virtual reality experience like I just had to the theater with Mickey Mouse. So this, like I say, that's what I mean. These lucid dreams last for hours and hours and hours and hours. And it feels like you're in a different time era and or different dimension. And then sometimes after you wake up, you may not have quite that perception or whatever. But most of the time I do. Where it just totally feels like you're in a different dimension. And sometimes you're in a different time era. But anyway, okay, so the aliens, they're always sticking me in, the reptilians mainly, they're always sticking me in motel rooms and hotel rooms. They've done that thousands and thousands and thousands of times because they know it's something you can relate to or whatever. And now I'm wondering if this reptilian was the same one that visited me back in 2006 at the Omni Hotel in real life. He was messing with me in 3D as well as out of body. And that was at the hotel back in 2006 at the Omni Hotel because I was in room 617. And this experience is probably the same being. Okay, so in this experience, he also, it's like I was in room 617. But I felt like I was way higher than just the 6th floor. I felt like I was like on the 36th floor, if that makes sense. But yeah, he did, when I went out of the hotel room, 3, 4, 5 different times, and a few times after I went back to my room, I was like, like having a hard time finding my room. Like I would see like 607 and I was trying to find 617. And finally I always found it. But the aliens are always doing that, like confusing you and stuff. So since he put that in my scenario, the room 617, yeah, it makes me wonder if that was the same being that was messing with me back in 2006 at the Omni Hotel in real life or in 3D or whatever. It's probably the same being that gave me this experience, this out of body experience, but more under the dreamy. It wasn't a dream. It totally felt real. It's not a dream. It totally felt real, except the atmosphere, it feels like a different dimension. It doesn't feel like 3D. It feels like totally different dimension. It feels cool. But yeah, it's totally virtual reality, except more under what I'll call the lucid dream state. But it is not a dream. Dreams are like when you're just like you see these, when all you do is see images, like fuzzy ass images, and you don't even feel like you're part of the dream. That's a dream. Okay, so see, that's what I'm saying. Some of these lucid dreams are very hard to kind of talk about because, like, a lot of times you're just walking around for hours and hours and hours and hours, like I was doing. It's very tedious, very intricate. And I was cleaning for hours and hours and hours and hours in my motel room. Well, actually, my hotel room. Okay, and first of all, okay, so I was in Philadelphia, and I did have Philadelphia on the brain recently. Because my boss just went there, and American Ninja Warrior was in Philadelphia. So I did have Philadelphia on the brain. So the reptilian took me to Philadelphia. And I never been there in real life, but I was in this, it seemed like a freaking skanky ass huge hotel. Well, at first it kind of wasn't like that, and then it just seemed to turn skankier as the dream, or as the virtual reality experience went on. And so basically, it was like a Super 8 hotel that was transferred, or that was, transformed into another hotel. And I remember, I did have that word on the brain, but I forgot what it was. So, but it was like it was a Super 8 hotel, and they transformed it into another, kind of more upper scale hotel, but it still wasn't that nice of a hotel. But I can't remember. I just remember it was like an old Super 8 hotel, and like they renovated it and made it into, one of those nicer hotels. But I can't remember. I did. I mean, I did. They did. I mean, the alien did mention that to me, the other name of the hotel, but I can't remember it now. But I do remember the Super 8 part. But anyway, so it's like I was in room 617, but I totally felt like I was on the 36th floor. That's how high up I was. That's how tall this hotel was. And of course, when I looked out the window, I saw like tall buildings and stuff. But I never did go out on the street and walk around or anything. Well, actually, I did, but this wasn't like when I went out on the street or whatever. It was more like I went out in the parking lot. But anyway, I'll get to that later. But anyway, so basically, yeah, this was like an awesome experience, because if I go to bed real early and if I sleep really, really good, that's when I get these like freaking lucid dreams that last for hours and hours and hours and hours. And so anyway, okay, so I was in Philadelphia, and I was in a big tall hotel, and basically I was only staying there for no more than 2 or 3 days. The alien already programs all of this for my brain, the whole scenario for my brain before he begins experience. But basically I was only staying there for no more than 2 or 3 days. But the room that they put me in, okay, at first it was just kind of like one room, and then it was connected to another room. So basically 2 rooms together. So it was a pretty big motel room or hotel room. And basically, the room that they put me in, that the hotel staff put me in, okay, let me think. Okay, so like basically, okay, there was a black family that stayed there, and they, for whatever reason, they had to stay at the hotel because they were kicked out of their house. And it was like a man, woman, and 2 black kids, like a boy and a girl. And the funny part is, at the end of the scenario, I find a picture of the daughter and the mom. Okay, now I did not sense that this family was dead or anything. I just sensed that for whatever reason, they had to quickly abandon the hotel room for whatever reason. Like they already got kicked out of their house, so that's why they had to go stay for months and months and months in this hotel room. And I did tell, there was a man, maid, so to speak, that was walking around. Oh, he was more like, he seemed more, instead of a maid, he seemed more like a janitor. This man that was walking around, he had short brown hair, and he looked about, 30, 28, something like that. Because I remember telling him, I was like, I know that family that, was in this motel room before me. I believe that they stayed in the room for at least 6 months, maybe even longer. But I knew that somehow, that they stayed there for at least 6 months. And what the deal was, so anyway, this black family, for whatever reason, they had to abandon that motel room, and they left 95 to 99% of their belongings behind. For whatever reason, they just couldn't take all their belongings with them. And since all of their belongings was just in perfect condition, basically, except for that nasty ass old vacuum cleaner, all their belongings was in totally excellent condition. It's like the hotel staff did not want to take all that stuff out of the room, so they just left it in there. They totally left it in there. Okay, so at first I'm sitting there like walking around the hotel room when they put me in, room 617. And like I say, I knew that a black family had lived there for at least 6 months, maybe even longer. And for whatever reason, they had to leave quickly, so they left all their belongings behind. So basically, a big part of the scenario, like I say, for hours and hours and hours, I'm walking around this motel room trying to get a lot of the shit out of the room because I did not want it in there when I was staying in there for 2 to 3 days. And basically, like, I didn't mind, like, I remember, like, okay, the first part of the scenario, the room was kind of clean. And for whatever reason, after that, the alien made it like all nasty and disarray and all dirty. But it wasn't like that at the beginning. And I was walking around the motel room, the room that was on the left. And like I say, after a little while into the scenario, I go to the other room that was hooked onto this room because that was also part of the room, apparently. So it's kind of like I was in 2 rooms, because sometimes, in real life, 2 rooms can be hooked together by a door. But the first part of the scenario, I'm literally walking around observing all their shit, and it goes on for, seems like hours and hours and hours and hours. So I did see some toys laying on the floor, and I looked at the vanity, and there was still like a razor and like some toothpaste and stuff on the vanity. And over to my left, like if I'm facing north, over to my left was the dresser, those low dressers. And I pulled out the dresser drawer, and it had the man, the black man. It had his shirts. There were some shirts and some sweatshirts, and they were all like totally like brand new condition. And I was just like, wow, I'm gonna take these with me. But the thing was, deep down, I knew I wouldn't be able to take a lot with me, because for whatever reason in the scenario, I knew that I was gonna be in an airplane to fly back home or whatever, not in a vehicle. So it's like, I was like, oh man, I don't think I'm gonna be able to shove all that in my bag. But I did plan on taking like one of the sweatshirts or one of the shirts or whatever. And there was only like maybe 5 or 6, like 3 nice shirts, 4 nice sweatshirts. And you can fit much more than that. But there was like, so the whole dresser drawer was not filled up. And, but yeah, so, they were in brand new condition. And so that's why I was gonna, go ahead, take that with me, take either one of the sweatshirts or something like that with me. But I knew I just couldn't take all of it, because I knew my bag wouldn't be big enough for the airplane and everything. So, so facing north, in the back of the room, there's, what do you call it? It's like there's a little shelf over to the right and some shelves on the bottom. And then there's also like, it was like a closet, like a rack, but it wasn't really like a closet. It wasn't, it didn't have a door. Okay, so it had, some, what do you call it? Like a clothing rack in the back. And over to the left of the clothing rack was all her clothes, the wife's clothes. And it was all just dressy crap. I mean, like blouses. It was all nice, real feminine stuff. And I didn't want all that, you know what I'm saying? I wanted like the sweatshirt, shit like that. Okay, now over to the right was just like, and also over to the left on the floor, it's like there was this it looked like, I think the aliens took that from my brain. Kind of like when somebody goes around their yard and they spray for weeds or whatever. There was one of those looking things over to my left on the floor. And I knew I wanted to roll that damn thing outside and just stick it in the hallway, because I didn't want any chemicals. The aliens know I don't have like any chemicals in my house. They know that I've been, I took all chemicals out of my house and stuff. And so that's why they put this in this, that's why he put this in the scenario. So that big old thing, I rolled that out in the hallway. It seemed like I knew it had, I don't know, acetone or something like that in it. And when I rolled it out in the hallway, the funny thing was, it started leaking really bad all along down the wall. And like I say, I didn't really want the the hotel staff to know I was throwing all the shit out in the hallway. But I didn't want it in my room while I was staying in the room. I didn't mind the clothes and stuff like that being in the room, but I didn't want any chemicals in the room. Okay, so over to my right, kind of close to the female clothes rack with all of her dressy clothes, and she had at least 7 to 8 articles of clothing hanging up, and it was like all blousey skirts, blousey stuff, like blouses and stuff. And then over to the right was shelves, and it was just nothing but what you see in most people's houses. Like Windex, soft scrub, acetone, Pledge, nothing but chemicals. Chemicals. And there was probably at least 25 different chemicals. And 25 different bottles, cans, and blah, 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 blah. So a lot of that stuff, or most all of it, I, shoved that out, and I took it out the door and put it along the hallway, for the staff to come and get, because I didn't want that in my room. But yeah, I mean, it was just like amazing, like all the chemicals and stuff that was sitting there on the shelves. And I wish I could remember some more of them, because it was all very, very clear when I was under the scenario. But like when you wake up and stuff, a lot of times you'll forget, as hours go by, you're going to forget tiny little details. But I know there was like some acetone, and there was like Pledge and like Windex, and there were some bottles that looked like that. But there was like at least 15, 20 other things too sitting there, and it was just all chemicals. So I shoved that all out the front door and put it along the wall. Oh yeah, by the way, this hallway was totally skinny and narrow. I mean, super small and narrow. And I did interact with that Mel staff, because like I say, I was like, I just know that family had been living there for at least 6 months or longer. I just somehow knew that, and I told them that. And so anyway, and like I say, as the scenario went on, there was, and I went back into the room, and it was all just nasty, dirty. I mean, just major, like, thick dust all over the floor. That's when I got the vacuum cleaner out, and this vacuum cleaner looked like it was from the 1950s or something. It was really old. And I started vacuuming, and this was all like totally freaking virtual reality. I was just vacuuming all tediously, vacuuming, and it filled up with dust really, really fast. And I was like, crap, now I got to go empty it. And in real life, I know the aliens copied that, because I have a vacuum cleaner where I throw out, it doesn't come, you don't have to put a bag in it. So you just have to like dump the dust out into a bag. So the aliens know that. And I remember thinking, okay, like I couldn't find a trash can to put the dust. I didn't want to just continually vacuum with it fold up like that. But eventually, outside, I went out the front door, and outside I saw 2 or 3 small trash cans sitting there. So I finally like emptied the trash. I mean not the trash, the dust in the vacuum cleaner. But yeah, I mean, this part, it just went on for like hours and hours and hours. Me going around, cleaning, and observing what this black family had left behind, which was totally like 95% of their belongings. And, okay, so anyway, okay, the other part of the scenario, okay, no, this is where the other room comes in. Like the other room that's hooked onto this room. I go into the other room, the other part of the scenario. I go into the other room, and for whatever reason, I can't remember why, how I knew these people, but somehow I invited 3 women over. Okay, one of the females was 36, the other one was 30, the other one was younger than that. And I can't remember exactly what the younger one looked like, but I totally remember what the 36-year-old looked like and the 30-year-old looked like. And it's like I kind of have a fling with a 30-year-old, and she's kind of slender, about 5'6", kind of short. Oh, I know what the aliens copied. I know what they copied from. Yeah, they copied from. I just watched a few minutes of. I came across it on Netflix. I came across a show. What was it called? And there's a woman in there that, yeah, totally matched the woman that was in the scenario. So that's where the aliens copied that woman from. My Bad Affliction or something like that. Yeah, because, yeah, that woman, except she looked a little older, probably than 30, but in the scenario, she was younger. She was like 30. And we had a fling, like we just started like cuddling and stuff in the bed, like for quite a long time. But anyway, for whatever reason, I invite those three like women over, and I don't know why the alien didn't really program that for me. So anyway, so after I walk around forever and ever and ever in the room where they basically live most of the time. Oh yeah, and basically that first room, it didn't have any beds or anything in it. That's what I'm saying. At first, the scenario starts off with just that one room. And then, like I say, it hooks onto that other room where the two double beds are. So basically, like I say, but at first, when the scenario first starts, I was just in the one room where, all the chemicals were, and the clothing was, and the bathroom. But there wasn't, like, any doors to the bathroom. There wasn't any doors to the closet. Okay, so then, like I say, I end up in the adjoining room, and that's where the two beds are. And for whatever reason, I invite these three women over. And like I say, eventually they start cramping my style real bad, because in a little bitty room like that, you know what I mean? I like to be alone, you know what I mean? So, but anyway, of course, the 30-year-old was nice and everything. And we kind of interacted and talked a little bit. And the 36-year-old was the bitch. The other woman, the younger woman, like I said, she was nice too, but I can't remember what she looked like. The 36-year-old, okay, for whatever reason, she leaves the room. Then she comes back into the room, and she gives me an apple. And basically, this is the really funny, freaky part. Oh, and I meant to put a picture of the worm, of the mealworms, but so this was the real weird part and virtual reality part. Like this whole scenario was like totally virtual reality. Totally real. I mean, the dust, everything was real. The sweatshirts and everything, it was all very real. It was not a dream. But like I say, it was more instead of like 3D state, more lucid dreamy state. Okay, so this is the weird part. She gives me an apple and she says, "I'm such a nice person, I want to give you this apple." Something pertaining to that. Like she made me believe that she was like a nice person, but she was like really an evil person. And so she gives me this apple, and I never did try to eat it or anything like that. I think the aliens or not the aliens, but I think the reptilian put that in there maybe because of that scene in Once Upon a Time, where some of those apples turn poisonous or something like that during that first season or whatever. I think they're apples from that tree or whatever. I can't remember what they were. I can't remember if they were oranges or apples, but I think they were apples. But anyway, but she's like, I want to give this to you because I'm such a nice person, and blah 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 blah, and so I take the apple, and all these, like, the only thing I can describe it was all these mealworms start coming out of it, but they weren't exactly like a mealworm. I mean, they were about 90% identical, but they weren't 100% identical to a mealworm, but they looked similar. It's like these worms were more, I don't know, kind of skinnier, kind of had sharper legs on them, but they were close to looking like a mealworm. And so all these mealworms start coming out of the apple, and this was after I had already like cuddled with that woman in the bed for a long time or whatever. Okay, so the mealworms started like coming out of the apple. Then the next thing I know, they're just like all over the floor, and they start attacking my ankles, my left ankle, my right ankle. I mean, there's like 500 that just bam started attacking my ankles. And every time I wiped them off of me, like I shooed them off of me with my hand, they like bam, they started attacking me again. And I did that over and over again, trying to get the mealworms. Well, they weren't mealworms, but they were close to it. These worms that were attacking my ankles, I kept trying to take them and shove them off of me. And every time I do that, they just kept like coming back and attacking my ankles again. And this is where too, it's like they're all over the floor. They get all over the bed. And so another part of the scenario, I start vacuuming the whole floor, like intricately. I start vacuuming all of the bedding. Yeah, the aliens copied that from my brain too, because I do that sometimes. I'll put the little the attachment on top of my comforter to try to get flea eggs off or whatever. I'll do that sometimes. The fleas are going away though on my cats, because eventually they just go away. It takes a long time, but they just go away eventually. After you just keep combing them and combing them and combing them, eventually they just go away. So they don't have very many fleas anymore. But yeah, so that's what I'm saying. This experience, I mean, I spent at least 30 minutes or longer just cleaning, trying to suck up all those mealworms, those rogue mealworms that were attacking my ankles. But that part was really weird and interesting. Okay, so here is the other part of the scenario. Okay, for whatever reason, okay, and like I say several times, I went out of the room, and then, well, because sometimes, I had to go out of the room to put the chemicals along the wall, because I didn't want them in my in the room while I was going to be staying there for 2 to 3 days. And there was also like a little dresser thing. It seemed like I rolled out there. It must have been because I knew there was crap in it that I didn't want in there, chemicals or something. But I do remember like a little shelf that I like rolled out the door too, because I didn't want it in my room. And so anyway, but like a few times, like I would go out the front bedroom. I mean, not the front bedroom, the room, and I would try to. I did my thing, and then I would try to go back and find my room. And I remember looking, like I would see like 607, and I'm sitting there trying to find 617. But finally, I did that 2 or 3 times, and finally I found 617. Finally, I found my room. Okay, but another time I went out. Okay, for whatever reason, after the crazy woman gave me the apple, and it was infested with little demonic worms. For whatever reason, I went out, the door again, down the hallway, and it's like I go to the parking lot of the hotel, because I was outdoors at that point. I go to the parking lot, and it's like these people are testing out a car that doesn't have to be manned by a person. Like this car didn't have anybody in it. And so this car, it like to the left, it drives along to the left, and then it explodes. It just explodes in fire. And I was just like, whoa. And everybody was like, there's nobody in it. There's nobody in it, because it's a car that they were just testing out to see if it could drive, by itself or whatever. So it came from like the right, and it shot to the left. It started going real fast to the left, and then it just explodes in a fire. And